This is the penultimate session of today's summit. We called it Plenary 4, Empowering All Australians to Achieve Their Global Potential and Delivering Through Good Governance. And if you like, everything else that's gone before has been important, vital in fact, but this maybe is about what we decide to do next, both individually and collectively. I just want to say that before I throw to my co-moderator, Dr. Jacqueline Dutton, and to our 4 panellists who provide, I think, very relevant contributions from their various backgrounds. I know each of you well, personally, and I know what a contribution you'll make to this really important session that's about saying, what does it actually mean to talk about empowering citizens, and what does it mean about improving governance? This has been on our minds at the Global Foundation for quite some considerable time. It's an issue about saying how do we encourage, and we've heard it today in all the sessions about people-to-people links, and how do we encourage people to reach their global potential. I remember senior Aboriginal figure Patrick Dodson saying a number of years ago at one of our summits, how do I help my people, my Indigenous Australians, also to reach their global potential? How can we all become global Australians in the Asian century? And from my personal perspective, and you heard it last night coming from the Managing Director of the IMF, Christine Lagarde, you heard it from the Sherpa of the Mexican President, who's running the G20 this year, that there is an offer to help with governance at the global level, whether it's about the G20 on various issues like food security, or running the IMF and the world financial system, which is tough. What's intriguing about that from my perspective is that we are in the game. Your organisation, the Global Foundation, has a seat at the table. We're seeing that governance and governing isn't just done by those who are elected to office, as much as we respect and regard and appreciate the challenges they face. We're all in it at the table in real time together. Jacqueline Dutton, my co-moderator.
Thanks so much, Steve, for setting the scene for today's panel discussion. I'm Associate Dean of Engagement in the Faculty of Arts at the University of Melbourne, and part of my role is growing partnerships. And this is one of the partnerships with the Global Foundation that I'm very, very proud to be a part of. One of the ways in which we've been working together has been in formulating a discussion paper on empowering every citizen to achieve their global potential and delivering through good governance. This paper has been evolving over the last 18 months or so in consultation with various interest groups and members of the Global Foundation. But it's also been constantly changing with new news from abroad. The Arab Spring, the British riots, the Tea Party in the United States, and of course we've also recognised the economic, political and cultural shifts that we're witnessing in our Asian neighbourhood and elsewhere around the world. However, the central question that we're asking ourselves remains the same. How can we achieve and maintain the best life possible for the greatest number of people? It's a simple question, but the answers depend on the needs and desires of the day. Our priorities might oscillate between physical comfort, spiritual guidance, intellectual challenges, and personal relationships. But what we always want to know is that each and every one of us can have an influence on the way in which our society develops, both at local, national, and global levels. To make this possible, that is, to empower every citizen, we need to think about our democratic structures and governance at all levels. And I'm sure that we will hear more from our panel today about ways in which Australian organisations are encouraging citizens into roles of engagement through making diverse and often marginalised voices heard in today's society. But before we open to the panel, I would just like to make mention of a particularly compelling message that has been emphasised by many of the speakers today, notably Jonathan Mills. And that message is the urgent need to promote understanding and sensitivity in all areas of communication and exchange between Australia and our Asian neighbourhood, as well as into the Pacific and the wider world. The strategy that many of today's speakers have proposed to meet this need is developing people-to-people relationships through corporate, cultural, educational, government and individual contacts. Now, I want to ask a question here. What is the common element that all of these people-to-people contacts and relationships share? The answer is travel. We all have to travel, and we have to travel in both directions. Sometimes Australians into Asia, sometimes Asians into Australia, to see and experience the different contexts in which we live and work, to understand ourselves better as well as other cultures. His Excellency Ambassador Chen Yuming mentioned that Chinese tourists represent the largest financial contribution to Australian tourism today. With the strong Australian dollar, Australians are travelling to Asia and abroad more than ever before. Mark Laurie said very powerfully, "We must travel," quoting Margaret Mead. And it's true, but let's not forget that we are already travelling. How can we empower these travelling citizens to help us to transform understanding and sensitivity between cultures? This is one of the main aims of the Australian Festival of Travel Writing that's taking place in Melbourne in February 2013, and of which I am the director. We want to bring Chinese students into workshops with Horn of Africa migrants. We want to bring backpackers to Bali in contact with East Timorese activists. We want Michael Palin to talk to boardrooms about how important intercultural communication is in establishing fruitful relationships while travelling at a breakneck speed around the world, which many of us are doing today. The Australian Festival of Travel Writing is just one forum in which we can envisage ways of foregrounding our mobility with the aim of promoting understanding and sensitivity between cultures. But there are many, many more possibilities for promoting understanding and sensitivity between cultures. And I know that our panellists will offer a rich range of perspectives on how to empower each and every citizen to achieve their global potential and how this citizen engagement might impact on good governance in this country. And so, without further ado, let's hear some more from our panellists.
Thanks, Jacqueline. Greg Hunt, the Honourable Greg Hunt, is Shadow Minister for, I think, multiple portfolios, including Sea Lane partnerships. Greg, it's over to you.
I take your cue. Thanks very much to Jacqueline and to Steve and to everybody. The starting point for me is that good governance is about participation, and participation is about structures. How do we get people to participate? I want to give three simple ideas in hopefully 3 minutes: local, national and regional. At the local level, when you look around our cities, what is it that people want? They want to be able to spend time with their families. They want to get to and from work. They want to be part of a community where a city is the broader notion of a series of connected communities. What is missing? To a certain extent there is planning, but there isn't deep long-term planning. What I propose is that we work towards the establishment of 30-year long-term planning commissions that put in place the long-term structures over a 30 and 50-year time frame for each of our cities. But the interesting thing here is that there should be federal, state and local representation, but just as significantly, the planning community and the social community, as well as the opposition of the day, because that's how we create blueprints that are not binding but enduring. So it's firstly to create these long-term planning commissions with a bipartisan representation. It's quite a different approach, but that way you get buy-in on the concept, and that way we can plan for an environment which will preserve the right areas and allow people space and openness, but the ability to travel freely. The second thing is at the national level, where does the disengagement come from in terms of participation in government? There's clearly a sense of disenfranchisement. Now, there are many different answers. The single proposal I would suggest is there is a place in national life for plebiscites. I think we've seen two in recent sort of memory in Australian history. One was the National Song Contest in, I think, 1977, but much more significantly, the election of delegates to the Australian Constitutional Convention just about 14 years ago. And that was a very fulfilling exercise, that wherever people stood, they had a vote on the convention and then a referendum on the on whether or not Australia should become a republic. But most significantly, this idea, I think, is the way to break through some of the thorny issues, whether you have a carbon tax or you don't. That's something which could easily, in the future, be put to a plebiscite where there is a genuine logjam in the parliament and people have differing views and agreements, and there's a legitimacy to the decision as well as a participation which comes from a structure like that. So long-term planning commissions, a much greater role for national plebiscites, and there's work on how you can do that, but it's not difficult. And then the third thing, at the global level, so going local, national and global, or more regional, is the creation of what Steve was referring to in terms of the sea lanes partnerships. What's the great regional challenge for us in terms of security? I think it's a breakdown in relations between China and neighbours at some stage. And what's the source of that? It's resource security. What China wants more than anything else is resource security in terms of energy, the ability to feed its people and the ability to make its goods. And the key to that is freedom of the seas. And what I think we should be working towards is a sea lanes partnership. The United States, China, India, Southeast Asia and Australia playing a key role there. And if we can build that, we're not only giving a security guarantee and an economic imperative, but we are creating an element of trust with China over and above anything which has been there before. So there are three ideas: the long-term planning commissions, secondly the idea of a greater use of plebiscites in national decision-making, not putting everything off, but you can imagine it once every 3, once every 5 years, and thirdly the Sea Lanes partnership with China.
Thank you, Greg.